I want to tell you about a client of mine. I'm going to call him Calvin. Calvin did everything right. And I mean everything. He didn't miss days. He followed the protocol exactly how I laid it out. His blood labs were optimized. Products phased in at the right time. The man was locked in. And at day 90, nothing had changed. Same scalp, same pattern in the mirror. Now, I've been doing this long enough to know what happens at day 90. Most guys quit. They go back online, find the next product with the best before and after, try it for a few weeks, get their hopes up, crash again. I've watched that cycle destroy more hair loss recoveries than DHT ever has. Calvin didn't quit, but I'll be honest, he was close. And then his heart started racing. Not from excitement, from the protocol. The minoxidil he was applying every morning was making his heart pound. He started cutting out his supplements one by one, trying to figure out what was doing it. On top of that, he was under serious stress at work, not sleeping enough, and every single morning, same mirror, same result. Is this even working? That right there, that moment is what I call the 90-day wall. The 90-day wall is the graveyard of more hair loss recoveries than DHT ever was. Here's what I want to do today. I want to walk you through exactly what was happening inside Calvin's scalp that he couldn't see in the mirror. I want to break down why his heart was racing and the one rule change that stopped it completely. And I want to show you the strategy we use to rebuild his protocol from scratch and get him to the other side of the wall. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. The biology moves before the mirror does. You just have to know how to read it. So let me back up and give you the full picture on Calvin. When he first came to me, we started natural, saw palmetto, derma rolling, the right topicals, scalp massage protocol. And for the first few months, honestly, we were making progress. Texture was improving, inflammation was coming down, the soil was getting ready. But around month 3, we hit a ceiling. Density wasn't moving, and Calvin was consistent. This wasn't a compliance problem. The inputs were right, the outputs just weren't following. Now, before I go further, let me explain how I actually measure progress with my clients. Because it looks better, it's not a system. Feelings aren't data. I use something called the Global Photographic Assessment Scale, the GPA. It's a clinical grading tool that runs from -3 to +3. -3 means significant density loss, things are getting worse. 0 means no change, and +3 means significant improvement, we're winning. The way it works is simple. We take baseline photos on day 1 and control lighting. Same angles every time. And at set checkpoints, day 90, day 180, day 270, we put them side by side and grade the change against the scale. No feelings. No, I think it might be a little better. Just the photos and the data. At day 90, Calvin was sitting at 0. No change. And for a man who had been that consistent, that stings. That's when I pulled his blood work. Most guys never think about the blood work when they think about hair loss. They think DHT. They think genetics. They don't think about what's happening systematically, what's happening in the blood that feeds every single follicle on their head. Calvin's A1C came back at 5.8%. For context, a normal A1C is below 5.6%. Pre-diabetic range starts at 5.7. At 5.8%, Calvin was sitting right at the threshold. And here's what elevated sugar does to your scalp that nobody talks about. It creates something called vascular stiffness. The small blood vessels that feed your follicles, they start to stiffen. That scalp gets tight. You can actually see it. That shiny, reflective skin on the crown that looks like the follicles have gone quiet. That's not just thinning hair. That's fibrosis. Scar tissue forming where hair should be growing. Think of it like trying to water a garden through a kink hose. The water is there, the pressure is there, but nothing is getting through to the roots. Calvin had a kink hose, and no amount of topical product was going to fix that on its own. So I made a call. I added minoxidil. Now, I normally tell clients, give it 6 months, see how your scalp responds. Let the data come in slow. But I wasn't willing to do that with Calvin, not with an A1C sitting at the pre-diabetic line. His biology already had resistance working against him. Waiting 6 months to find out he was a non-responder wasn't a risk I was going to take with his time. There's also something most people don't know about minoxidil. Roughly 40% of men lack a specific enzyme in the scalp. It's called sulfur transferase, and without it, the foam does essentially nothing. The medicine just sits there. It can't convert into its active form. So instead of just applying the foam and hoping we stack the deck, I added adaptogene gel to his routine. Now on the label, it says acne, and that's not why you're using it. The retinoids in that gel force the scalp to produce more of that sulfur transferase enzyme. We're biohacking his scalp to make sure he becomes a high responder, not a non-responder. Then we added copper peptides. While minoxidil widens the blood vessels that already exist, copper peptides actually build new ones. This process is called angiogenesis. New blood vessels growing into stiff fibrotic tissue, breaking up the kink in the hose. Derma roller out, derma stamp in. The roller enters the scalp at an angle. You lose up to 50% of your depth. The stamp goes straight down, straight up. At 1.5 millimeters, you're hitting exactly 1.5 millimeters. No guessing. We need precision to reach the stem cells in his crown. We weren't just adding minoxidil. We were engineering the environment around it so he had no choice but to work. Calvin understood the plan. He locked in. So Calvin is 2 weeks into his new protocol. Adaptogene gel, copper peptides, dermastamp, minoxidil twice a day. And he texts me heart palpitations. Now, I want to be careful here because this is a moment where a lot of guys, and honestly, a lot of practitioners panic and pull the plug on everything. Just stop. Quit the minoxidil. Go back to square one. And I understand the instinct. When your heart is doing something it's not supposed to do, you want to stop whatever you think is causing it. Calvin did what most men do. He started cutting things out one by one. Stop the magnesium, stop the zinc, trying to isolate the variable. Palpitations kept coming. He figured it was stress. Maybe it was, but he wasn't sure. And the uncertainty is its own kind of weight when you're already stressed at work and your hair still looks the same. So let me explain exactly what was happening, because this isn't random and it isn't dangerous if you're understanding the mechanism. Here's the biology. Minoxidil is a vasodilator. That's its whole job. It widens your blood vessels to increase blood flow to the scalp. More blood flow means more nutrients reaching the follicles. That's why it works. But here's what most people don't tell you. When minoxidil widens those vessels, it doesn't just stay on your scalp. Some of it absorbs systemically, meaning it gets in your bloodstream. And when it does, it widens throughout your body, not just your head. Now add stress to that equation. When you're stressed, your cortisol spikes, your heart rate goes up, your blood is moving faster and harder through vessels that minoxidil has already widened. Your cardiovascular system is working overtime. It's like opening a fire hydrant when the pressure in the line is already maxed out. Calvin did what most men do. Calvin was applying minoxidil right out the shower. Hot scalp, wet skin, and here's what that does. A warm, moist scalp absorbs topicals faster and deeper. Instead of the medicine sitting on the skin and absorbing slowly, it goes straight into the bloodstream. Full dose, fast delivery, right when his cortisol was already elevated from the stress of his job. That's not a protocol failure. That's physics. 3 things were colliding at the same time: elevated stress, systemic minoxidil absorption, and a cardiovascular system that was already running hot. So here's what we did, and it was a simple fix, but it required understanding the mechanism first. Rule 1. Scalp must be cool and dry before you apply the foam. Not warm, not damp, cool and dry. That single change controls the absorption rate. The medicine stays on the skin, absorbs gradually, does its job on the scalp, and doesn't flood the bloodstream. Rule 2. During high stress periods, scale back to once a day, half the dose. Give the cardiovascular system room to breathe. We're not quitting, we're managing their variable. Calvin pulled back to once a day. Palpitations stopped completely. But here's the cost of that decision. And I want to be honest about it because this is what the 180-day review showed us. When you're only applying minoxidil once a day, you're giving your follicles half the chemical stimulation they need to convert vellus hair into terminal hair. You get activity, the factory opens up, but the product coming off the line, it's unfinished. Fine, wispy hair, baby hair that doesn't have the diameter yet to block the light or cover the scalp. At day 180, Calvin's GPA score was a +1. Slight improvement. The biology had shifted. The mirror hadn't caught up yet. And that gap between what the data shows and what the mirror shows, that's where most men give up. Calvin didn't. So here's where we are with Calvin at day 180. Heart palpitations gone. Scalp shifted from shiny and tight to matte and pliable. The fibrosis that was strangling his follicles is breaking up. The dermastamp is working. The soil is ready. And here's the honest conversation I had to have with Calvin at that review. I told him, this is a classic +1. The biology has shifted. The cosmetic appearance hasn't caught up yet. Most guys hear that and they're devastated. They wanted to see a transformation in the mirror. What they got instead was a clinical report telling them progress is happening underneath the surface. But Calvin had been in this long enough to understand something important. He said to me,
"What else I got to do? Like, I'm at this point where I'd rather, see the program out, see it through, put my best foot forward, and see what happens. I already tried my way, all these years, and really didn't get too far."
That right there is the mindset that wins. So what's the problem we need to solve going into the next phase? Simple. The follicles are active, but they're only getting half the chemical stimulation they need. Once a day, minoxidil kept his heart safe, but it also kept the hair fine. To convert vellus hair into terminal hair, pigmented, thick diameter that actually blocks light, we need to get back to twice a day. The question is, how do we do that without crossing back over the palpitation line? The microdose strategy. Here's the thinking. We know the full twice a day dose was too much when his stress was high and his scalp was warm. We also know once a day wasn't enough to drive the caliber shift that we need. So instead of going from 0 to 100, we find that line and we nudge it. Morning, full dose, applied to a cool, dry scalp. That's the primary stimulation window. We're not changing that. Evening, microdose, a smaller application target specifically at the weakest areas. The mid-scalp where those vellus hairs are trying to mature, the crown where the open lake pattern still persists. We're not flooding the system. We're irrigating the specific fields that need the most water. And here's why this is smarter than just ramping back up to full twice a day. By keeping the PM dose small, we stay below the threshold that triggers systemic absorption. The medicine does its work locally on the follicle without putting unnecessary load on the cardiovascular system. Calvin is essentially self-calibrating. He monitors how he feels. If there's no palpitation response, we know we have room. If something comes up, we know exactly where the boundary is. Think of it like a speed limit you set yourself. You don't need to gun it. You just need to stay in motion. Calvin came back 2 weeks into the microdose plan. No heart issues, scalp holding its moisture, still cut oats in the morning instead of quick oats. Yeah, we fixed the breakfast too. Cortisol management is part of the protocol. Himalayan salt and water first thing, getting outside before the day starts. And then he told me something that stopped me mid-sentence. He said,
I had someone notice, "Hey, Dale, your top of your head looking a little darker." And so they're seeing changes.
Not a doctor, not a trichologist with a magnifying glass and clinical lighting, a coworker in regular light, noticing something had changed. Now, I want to be straight with you. Calvin's story isn't finished. We're still in the protocol. The microdose plan is running. Day 270 is ahead of us, and that's where we're targeting a +2 on the GPA scale. Terminal hair, real density, the kind of change you can see without zooming in. But that coworker comment, that's not nothing. That's a man seeing himself come back. The biology moved. The mirror is finally starting to catch up. Let me bring this home. Calvin came to me with hair loss. That's it. That's all he knew. He was thinning, had been for years, and nothing he tried on his own had moved the needle. What he didn't know, what nobody had ever told him, was that his blood sugar was stiffening his scalp, that the quick oats he'd been eating every morning for years were spiking his cortisol before he even walked out the door. That minoxidil he was applying on hot, wet scalp was going straight into his bloodstream instead of staying where it needed to stay. None of that showed up on a shampoo bottle. None of that came with the product he bought online. And at day 90, when the mirror showed nothing, he almost quit. I want to talk directly to the man listening right now who is at his own day 90. Maybe it's not day 90 for you. Maybe it's day 60. Maybe it's 6 months in and you're still waiting for the mirror to catch up with what you know should be happening. Here's what I need you to hear. The day 90 wall is not a sign that the protocol failed. It's a sign that your body is doing exactly what biology does. It moves slow. It moves in sequence. And it does not care about your timeline. The dangling of the quick fix carrot has trained us to expect results in 3 weeks. Hair doesn't work that way. It never did. And anyone telling you otherwise is lying to take your money. What Calvin had at day 180 wasn't a transformation you could see from across the room. It was a +1 on a clinical scale. Matte skin where there used to be fibrosis. Vellus hair where there used to be bare scalp. A coworker noticing his crown looked darker. That's not nothing. That's everything. Because that's what the beginning of real growth actually looks like before the mirror catches up. And here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Calvin said it himself better than I could. And I quote,
I just wish there was more honest people. I know that it can be done. It's just understanding the mechanics of it.
This isn't magic. It's mechanics. Blood labs, protocol sequencing, cortisol management, knowing when to push, when to pull back, knowing that a heart palpitation isn't a reason to quit. It's a data point that tells you exactly where the boundary is. You don't need a miracle. You need a system. I want to be straight with you the same way I was straight with Calvin on day one. I don't know exactly what your genetics have decided, but I can guarantee the inputs, the blood labs, the protocol, the accountability, the side-by-side photos at day 90 that show you what the mirror can't. If you're ready to stop guessing and start building, the link is below. Book the call. We'll figure out exactly what's happening under the surface, and we'll build the environment your hair needs to come back, because the biology moves before the mirror does. You just have to be willing to stay in long enough to see it.